Welcome, fellow quilting enthusiasts. Today I have something really special to share with you. I think it will really help ignite that creative quilting spark within you. Get ready to come along with me while I share some really fun ideas that will add a special and unique touch to your quilts. Hi, my name is Fallon and I love to quilt. Today I'm going to be sharing some creative ideas to add some extra pizzazz to your quilts to help make them truly unique and really add a special touch where you can share some of that creative personality within you on your quilts. So first up, I want to give you the idea of really branching out from just using quilting cottons within your quilt. There are so many other different fabrics out there that will add a unique texture, style, and a lot of fun and interest to your quilts. Now, you don't have to use them for a full quilt like the one I'm going to show here, but it may just give you some ideas for adding something new to your quilts. So this is one of my first quilts. It is a jean quilt and it is honestly a crazy mess, but is one of my favorite quilts. I made this when I was a teen and it's all jeans. But what I want to talk about is that I added some of the waistband into the quilt. So you'll see belt loops on here. I added in pockets, front pockets as well as back pockets. And then what I think is really fun is that I added some pockets on that had some embroidery on it. So it has a butterfly. And what I think this adds to the quilt is a lot of texture, a lot of interest. There's a lot of things to look at on the quilt, but this could also give you the idea to add a little bit of embroidery into one of the patches on your quilt, even if it wasn't already on the fabric already. Now, something else fun is that the back of the quilt is a checkerboard design of bandanas. So I didn't use just one piece of fabric on the back. I made a separate quilt for the back of this quilt, but I also still didn't use traditional quilting fabric. These were bandanas that I purchased to sew together for the back of the quilt. So hopefully that gives you some ideas on how you could use some different textiles that aren't necessarily designed for making quilts. So another creative way to add your own unique touch to your quilt is by hand quilting. Now, stay with me here because I know we don't all love to hand sew, and that is perfectly fine. It isn't really my favorite all the time either. I've started getting into it more because I find it can be actually really relaxing for me to sit and just hand sew. So since I don't love it truly and completely yet, I like to add a combination of machine quilting to really hold the quilt in place and then add some hand quilting on later. That way I don't have to hand quilt the entire quilt. I can just add just enough to add a little bit of extra interest and texture to the quilt. So here on this quilt, I machine quilted along the seams of the quilt, and then I added just some triangles by hand quilting, just some bigger stitches. I'm not even trying to be really intricate and detailed, but it adds a little bit of color to this quilt that has only grays, blacks, and whites. And then it also highlights the triangles here a little bit more and adds some more definition to this quilt. I think it really took this quilt to the next level and definitely added a more unique touch to this simple design. Now, one thing fun with hand quilting is that you can do a lot of different designs, a lot of different textures, and a lot of different colors really easily. So here with this quilted tote bag that I made, I added a lot more stitch designs and colors with the hand quilting, and you could do that on a larger quilt as well. I think it's really a lot of fun and adds a lot more interest and detail to the design. One thing I think is also a lot of fun to add on to quilts is doilies, and there's so many other things you could add on to quilts if you wanted to, like lace and fabric ribbon and rickrack. There's all sorts of things that you could add on to quilts, but I really thought doilies were the perfect touch on this quilt. It is a Dresden plate, and the doilies fit perfectly with this design and really add a lot more flair to this quilt. And I think there's a lot of different ways you could add things like that to a quilt and really get creative and make it unique and your own. So now I mentioned adding lace to a quilt, and I did that as well. I added it right along the binding of one of my quilts, and I fell in love with that quilt. Oh my goodness, I thought it added such a fun touch to the binding. We often bind a quilt and just think of that as the final step to a quilt. There are so many fun things that you could do with the binding to make it add some extra fun and pizzazz to your quilt. And I actually have a video giving different ways to add some fun and interest to your quilt, so I will link to that down in the description below. But within that video, I did talk about how I added lace to the binding of my quilt. I also showed this quilt where I hand stitched across the binding, not meaning to hide the hand stitches, but have them be a feature on the quilt. I didn't show this quilt in particular, but I did talk about adding scrappy bindings to quilts. So there really is a lot of fun to be found within that video for adding extra interest to your quilt with binding. So I think a really fun way to add a creative and unique touch to your quilt is to think of a way that you could always sign your quilt. Add a signature to all of your quilts, and I don't mean a quilt label. Yes, you should label your quilts too, but I have two friends that are creators here on YouTube that add fun signatures to their quilt. And the first is Amy Dement. I will put her link to her YouTube channel down in the description below, but she always adds a signature piece of fabric to her quilt, and that is polka dots, and I think that is such a fun idea. Adding those polka dots is truly a unique way for her to sign her quilt and say, hey, this is my design, this is my quilt, and you will always find polka dots in her quilt, and I love that. And then Donna with the channel Handmade by Ying with Donna also adds her own unique signature to her quilts as well. When she is finishing off her quilts and quilting them, she always adds a little bit of a meander and then puts a heart in the corner of her quilts. So if you ever receive or are lucky enough to receive a quilt from Donna, you will see that little heart design in the corner of her quilts, and I think that is just a wonderful way to, finish off a quilt and make sure everybody knows who it's from. So there really are a lot of different ways that you can let your creativity shine through with your quilts. Let me know if any of the ideas that I had here sparked some creative ideas within you. And then I also encourage you to share some of your creative quilting ideas down in the comments below. Let's encourage each other and inspire each other to be a community of creative quilters. Happy quilting, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!